Dear defenders, this is day 1015 of Russia's desperate invasion of Ukraine. The good Ukrainian drones hit the barracks of Kadyrov's Spetsnaz in Chechnya. Putin's niece accidentally revealed the number of the missing Russian soldiers, and Russians blame Ukraine for their failures in Syria. You're watching Only Facts with Operator Starsky, and we will talk about the most important updates right now. Tonight, good Ukrainian drones visited Russian military airbase in Diaghilevo, not far from Ryazan, and additionally strikes were reported in Novorossiysk, Taganrog, and Bryansk. Chief of Ukrainian Ministry of Defense earlier stated that Ukraine launched a mass production of the long-range Palanitsa drones that were introduced earlier this year. Also, Ukrainian industry increased production of the cruise missile system R-360 Neptune, which is the improved version of the same cruise missile that sank the Russian flagship Moscow in 2022. Additionally, tonight, good Ukrainian drones reached Chechnya, where they passed greetings to the Kadyrovite Spetsnaz. It was reported that the barracks were hit. We can see the damage on the footage made this morning in Grozny. Unfortunately, no info on casualties, and hopefully later I will be able to tell how many Kadyrovites became good or at least improved. Russian Deputy Minister of Invasion Anna Tsivilova, also known as Putin's niece, accidentally revealed the number of Russian soldiers missing in action. During the briefing with the chiefs of committees that took place in the terror Russian parliament, she talked about the process of collecting DNA samples from the relatives of the Russian invaders that went missing in Ukraine, and accidentally she revealed the number of such cases since the beginning of this year.
Родственники ДНК, я уже сказала, мы все берем, они сдают бесплатно, у них принимает это МВД абсолютно бесплатно, за свой счет делает и также в свою базу вносит всех родственников, которые к нам обратились. Я уже сказала, 48 тысяч, это тоже ведется.
According to Putin's niece, Anna Tsivilova, the Russian Ministry of Interior collected 48,000 DNA samples of the relatives of the missing Russian terrorists. What kind of relatives are we talking about? In May 2024, terror Russian parliament adopted a law that obliges the relatives of the missing Russian soldiers submit their DNA samples to the terror Russian authorities. According to the law, the samples are only accepted if the Russian invader is officially confirmed missing in action, which makes it 48,000 samples of the Russian terrorists missing in action collected over the past 7 months. In 2022, Putin classified all the data related to the Russian losses in Ukraine, and the reason it happened was because in the very early days of the Russian invasion, Ukrainians published hundreds of videos showing the Russian columns on fire, piles of Russian bodies eaten by stray dogs, and other beautiful footage of successful Russian blitzkrieg in Ukraine. Remember the fridge train full of orcs in 2022, that's what I'm talking about. Today you can see daily footage showing Russians becoming good due to the Ukrainian artillery, FPV drone strikes, and close combat. Fact is, Russians don't have so much footage to show, and whatever they have is not comparable at all. That's why they're trying to compensate, for example, recording their atrocities on camera, like castrating or decapitating Ukrainian prisoners. And also they massively use the power of human imagination, like spreading disinformation about millions of Ukrainians lost. And we've heard such bullshit from the propagandists like Douglas MacGregor already back in 2023. According to Russians, as of today, Ukrainian population must have been completely wiped out, and the reality is Russia still is not able to capture even a single major city in Ukraine over the past 3 years of war. But let's return to Putin's niece, Anna Tsivilova, the deputy chief of the Russian Ministry of Stolen Toilets. Generally, you can go to prison in Russia for revealing such sensitive data, and that's why the Russian terrorists didn't publish this video on their official website like they do every single time after such briefing. Of course, Putin's niece will never go to jail for revealing this information in Russia, but the head of the Russian Defense Committee, Andrei Kartopolov, quickly reminded her not to mention those numbers anymore.
Единственный один момент, коллеги, вот здесь вот она цифры называла, в том числе вот без случаев, я бдительно прошу, этими цифрами нигде не фигурирует. Это такая закрытая информация, достаточно чувствительная. И вот когда будем документы составлять, это тоже там, чтобы эти цифры нигде не плавали.
Even though official Kyiv doesn't really like talking much about the Ukrainian losses for obvious reasons, but we're still much more transparent. For example, on 2nd of December, President Zelensky said that Ukrainian losses versus the Russian losses are approximately 1-8, which, my friends, based on my own experience, I can confirm myself, as well as probably anybody who were ever deployed to Donbass. Invaders always face larger losses than the defenders. Also, they should always have more personnel involved in the offensive than the defenders. For example, according to the Russian field manuals, at least 3 times more than defending troops. And that is something that we can clearly see nowadays. And this raises an interesting question, my friends. Russian population is roughly 3 times larger than Ukrainian. At the same time, Russian losses are roughly 8 times larger. Can Russians physically defeat Ukraine considering these numbers? Please let me know your thoughts. Syrian militia fighting against the terrorist regime of Putin and Bashar Assad showcased footage of captured tanks, air defense systems, different vehicles, and even aircraft. All the hostile parties, which is regime of Assad, Putin's regime, and even Iranian troops, blame Ukraine for training and supporting the Syrian rebels as well as helping them fight. For example, here the Russian disinformation agency RIA Novosti says that Syrian rebels are prepared by the Ukrainian instructors and utilize their tactics. Reality is, the art of war is constantly changing, my friends. The tactics are changing and improving as well. The only thing that doesn't change is Russian field manuals made in 1947 and the Russian atrocities. The Syrian front collapses because Russia is too weak to afford fighting in so many areas. They either lose Syria or Africa or Ukraine. Vladimir Putin, also widely known as Huilo, he understands that, but of course it will be a huge shame to admit that the combined Syrian, Russian, Iranian army is being defeated by militia. That's why they have now this big scary boogeyman Ukraine, which only 2 years ago was collapsing and weak, but today it's almost a military superpower. The military superpower, by the way, that managed to take Aleppo in just 3 days. You see, in the minds of a crazy person like Tucker Carlson or Joe Rogan or Douglas McGregor or Dave Smith, there are 2 Ukraines. One of them is a deserted place with no population because it died defending from Russians. The other one is a freaking military mastermind capturing major cities like Aleppo. And if you're a good liar, those 2 Ukraines can peacefully coexist, which is exactly the case with everybody who supports the Russian terrorism. Tonight on the stream, we will debunk a lot of Russian disinformation. I'm sure you're gonna love it. And with that, my friends, I wish you a beautiful day. Let me know your thoughts in the commentaries. I'm Operator Starsky. As always, be safe.